Hi, Jose. How are you?
Yousra, very nice to meet you. Thank you very much for inviting me here. Inviting me? Well, you sort of invited me. I sort of invited myself, didn't
Welcome, Jose. So
I?
so glad to have you here, and so happy that we'll be recording together the IKIGAI International podcast. So and the Ikigai as a term has been used as a buzzword, and I'm so glad to have someone who actually lives in Japan and can tell us more about the Ikigai, how you perceive it in your own way, in your context in Japan. So first, I'd like to let you introduce yourself to our listeners so that they know who is Jose. And here you go, Jose.
Sure. Well, first, thank you very much. My name is José Domingo Cruz. I am a Canadian who lives in Japan, actually, on the southern island. Japan has four main islands. I live on the northern tip of the southernmost of those four main islands. Been here in Japan now for 31 years. Hard to
Wow.
believe, but been living here a long time. Um, and all of that time, I've been working basically in English teaching, English as a foreign language to Japanese students, mostly, especially lately at the university level, but also in private classes. I came to Japan without much knowledge of Japanese, but over the years, I've learned how to speak the language, learned to adapt myself to the culture, and let's see, what else can I say? A few achievements over that time. I've written a book. The one book that I wrote was on how to use Zoom, the software that we're using right now. That was something that an opportunity that came during the pandemic, took advantage of it. And that gave me the secondary opportunity to speak to my publisher, Dorothy Zemak, and ask her if she wanted me to actually write for her the book that I really want to write, which is on my teaching method. While I was here in Japan, I devised a teaching method that really helps both students and teachers with the struggle of getting especially false beginner and rather low level students of English in Japan to become comfortable to speak enough so that they can actually get the practice that they need to start becoming more fluent in their speaking. Those are probably the biggest things that I've done. I love living in Japan. I miss Canada, and I like traveling, and I like doing sports, but I like doing it mostly all here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I'm so impressed by the career path and whatever you've been through till now. But I'm curious, Jose, about the methodology that you talked about, how to encourage the Japanese learn the English language. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? So, but not to really kind of just to give an insight into the book. Okay, I don't want you to tell everything about the book, so people will be interested to get the book if ever they have the chance to.
Oh, I don't mind them knowing as much as they can, because I actually do a lot of presentations on what is in the book, and there is no way I could actually tell you everything that could be in the book.
Yeah, sure.
That would take like a couple of days of just me talking on and on, which I am quite capable of doing. So please cut me off if I start going on too much. But about the method number one is called verbal classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
Which can be kind of a generic term if you look it up on the internet. The whole idea that a verbal classroom is one that's it's very speaking centered. But with verbal classrooms, the way that I designed it, it's a way of getting the students to do through first, it's based on a few different theories. The main one is called skills acquisition by a professor named De Kaiser. And skills acquisition theory is the idea that to achieve any real skill in a language or in a lot of things like sports or arts, you have to come to a degree of automaticity or internalization of information. It isn't just a matter of providing information. English, it's the subject, the verb, the object, and adjectives and adverbs precede the object that they're modifying. That kind of information is not what is the key. to actually becoming fluent. The key to becoming fluent is being able to put in, as they say in sports, putting in the reps, putting in the repetitions, saying things often enough so that then it becomes automatic. I don't know about Arabic, but in Japanese, one of the great challenges that Japanese students have with studying English, and it's the other direction too, when you're a Latin-based language or a Western-based language learner of Japanese, the grammar is just simply backwards. The object clauses usually come at the very front of the sentence, and then usually finally you get maybe the subject of the sentence and then the verb at the very end, which is just so backwards from how English works. And being able to get to the point where that becomes automatic doesn't require an explanation. I just explained the main problem right there, but being able to do it fluently is really hard unless you say it a lot. But on top of that, just something as simple as, say, creating a question. Like, oh, are you Yousra?
Mm-hmm.
That whole idea of saying, you are Yousra, are you Yousra? That
Okay.
switch of the
Inversion.
subject and the verb and the subject
Inversion.
interchange is just crazy for Japanese people not to understand it, but to be able to fluently do it during a conversation.
I can
And
tell
then
you, yeah. Sure. It's okay. I can tell
No,
you
no, it's
about the Arabic version of this, because in the Arabic language, we start with the verb. So, ذهب José إلى الجامعة. So, José went to the university. So, I guess in Arabic, I'm not sure if in Japanese we start with the verb and then the subject and then the object, the complement. So, how does it
verb,
work in
subject? Okay.
Yeah.
Then it would be object, maybe a subject, then a verb. And there's this concept of in Japanese called the topic.
Okay.
Not the object nor the subject, but the topic. So there's the topic, the subject, the object, and then the verb at the very end.
Can we have an example, Jose, if you don't mind?
So for example, you would say something like, tomorrow I'm going to Hakata is the name of a city here in nearby. And if you were to say something like, tomorrow I'm going to Hakata with my mother, okay, it would go, ashita wa okasan to Hakata ni ikimasu. So ashita means tomorrow, so that would be the topic. If that's the chosen topic in your mind, if you're talking about what are your plans tomorrow, tomorrow, ashita wa is the marker for the topic. And then okasan is mother or my mother. Okasan to means with, okasan to Hakata ni means to Hakata. Iku or ikimasu is the verb. I'm not even in that, because it would be strange to say, I will go to Hakata. You just say, ashita wa okasan to Hakata ni ikimasu. You don't need to say I. And that confuses the crap out of most people first studying because when Japanese people speak at them, they're going, well, what was the subject of that verb? In the context of the sentence, it is very clear. But because your brain is, or your ears, of course, it's your brain, is looking for the subject in the sentence, and it doesn't come, it's so confusing. And until you get around that really just screws you up, because you're looking for that information. It's not there. My point being that kind of fluency requires repetitive training. But unfortunately, that's not the sort of educational methodology that's used in Japanese language classes. A lot of it is for tests. A lot of it is lecture style, grammar translation, check the spelling, and tests are multiple choice, and most lectures are very one way. And most students don't get a chance to actually speak the language, even if they want to. By the time they get to university, it's assumed that they speak the language because they've been studying it for 6 years. But everybody knows, everybody, from the students to the parents to the high school teachers to the university teachers, that most of these kids can't speak English, but they still continue to teach them in the same kind of stilted way, in methods that are based in 1920s methodology. Verbal Classrooms tries to change all of that by getting the students who are also very hesitant, very shy, very self-conscious about speaking English. They've been given a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? They're very conscious about their mistakes, and they don't really want to speak English. But if you put them into a verbal classroom environment, they realize that they can do it. They start from very simple structures, scaffold them up to much more difficult structures, and get them to start speaking. That's what verbal classrooms does, usually quite successfully too.
Excellent. Really, it's so very interesting to know more about this. So I'll be glad to attend one of your presentations, or even attend one of your classes where you apply this, Jose, either virtually or in person. So yeah.
Well, if you want to make it available to whoever's watching this podcast, there's a link that I can give you
Yes.
to my demonstration video of me actually giving a demonstration class in verbal classrooms.
Great.
And
great.
that will be, the beginning, the introductory part of the book, and then there's all kinds of advanced methods and advanced discussions after that.
That's generous from you, and actually, I'll be the first person watching the video, because I always want to discover new methodologies and new to me, or maybe that's not new to me. Maybe I'm applying it, but not really fully aware of it. That would be amazing to watch, and then I'll be sharing this. I'll be including this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, whatever link you want to share with us. So I'll be including this in the description to the podcast, so that anyone who's interested might get or might learn from your experience in the classroom. So Jose, yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, and I'll get you all of that information after we finish the recording.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's so generous from you. My question was related to the first question, is that how did you get into teaching? So when was the moment you said, look, you've been pursuing your undergrad studies, I don't know if it's in English or not since the beginning, but when was that moment you said, here is it, that's the one thing that I want to be doing for my entire life, or maybe for a long period of time? Yeah.
One of the things that I think will probably come up as a theme in some of the answers that I give to some of these questions is that I never really at any time decided to become a teacher until much after I was actually already of an audience, and to address ideas in a way that will get an audience to listen to me. And I think the very first time I thought, wow, teaching would be a cool job was when I was taking my very first sort of near university level courses at a junior college in Vancouver, where I grew up in Canada. And there were a couple of professors there that I really found to admire, because they just spoke so well and made the material so easily understandable. And I thought, wow, you know what? Being a teacher is pretty cool. And then I would talk to my friends, wow, I think his name is Johnson. Yeah, Professor Johnson is so cool. Don't you think he's a really great teacher? And yeah, he is a good teacher. Don't you think being like a professor in university would be a great job? Well, it might be. But one of my friends noted to me, yeah, but they have a lot of faculty meetings, and they have to publish papers, at least twice a year and all of this. And I thought, oh, I don't want to do that. I just want to teach. I like teaching. I don't like all of the paperwork and the bureaucracy and stuff. Yeah, exactly. But I did realize at that point, because I saw Professor Johnson, and there was one more professor, and unfortunately I don't remember his name, but he was a professor of history, but I admired him too. I thought that would be a really cool thing to do. And it merged really well with the idea that I've always been a little bit of I like being on stage in front of people. And that went through to university, and my field of study was actually political science. It wasn't actually English.
Oh, yeah.
And let's see what happened. I think I was getting into my third year, or maybe I was in a third year class in second year, something like that. And I saw a flyer of a recruiter for a language school in Japan. And he was recruiting undergrads to go from where they were to go work in Japan. At the time, this was 1987, 1988. And this was at the height of what was called the bubble economy. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Mm.
The bubble economy just made Japan so rich that they had so much money, they didn't know what to do with it. And one of the things that was very fashionable and very useful was the idea that we're going to go out and buy everything like Rockefeller Plaza. We need to be able to speak to people. So Japan went on a tear to start learning how to speak English, and they needed to recruit teachers. There was so much money in teaching English that these language schools were willing to look for these undergraduates who had just graduated and give them their plane ticket, give them an apartment, and just start sending them out to here and there to start teaching because it was that profitable. And I sat in on that seminar, that recruitment seminar, and I thought, hey, maybe this would be a really fun thing to do after I graduated. And I thought, yeah, it'd be fun. I could save some money before I go to grad school. You know, I was studying Pacific Rim Studies. Japan was one of the countries there, and I wanted to go to Japan and actually see what it was all about. So I took them up on their offer. So that was probably the first moment that I decided to actually teach. And it wasn't what I was trained to do, was political science. It was just English. And it wasn't because I thought I want to become a career teacher. It was just an easy way to make money, to get to Japan and basically have a vacation for a couple of years while I saved up.
And if ever you'll be given the chance to go back to your major studies, like political science, would you be doing this again? Or maybe...
If I had the money and the wherewithal to go back to school, I would need to get literate with all of the recent research in political science. But maybe, you know, political science would maybe just one field I would want to study. I think I would actually want to study more history, as well as maybe political science, and read about that, because I think one of the things that I found myself kind of, not at a disadvantage, but I was always wondering, well, what, you know, when the Arab Spring happened, what was that, 12 years ago? The whole idea of what was happening through North Africa was going, what is causing all of this? What was the historical background to all of this? When you read about the history between Ukraine and Europe and the Russians that goes back like 200 or 300 years, you think, wow, I never knew this was the whole history, you know, going all the way back to Napoleon and all of this. That missing bit of information makes it very difficult for anyone, even, you know, people who live in that part of the country, to understand their own problems as they are, because they don't understand their own history. So I think maybe history is something that I would want to study.
Yes, you got me into something really interesting, because North Africa history for us started a long time ago. Before the historians, they said, this is it. History starts now. I believe that history is a story, you know, even the word story exists in the word history. And we can even talk about her story, their story, people's stories, because like, who writes history? And
the winners.
Yeah, for sure. So the survivor, let's say it. So whoever will survive after any clash or battle will be writing history according to a certain kind of set of criteria. And when it comes to history, we have in Tunisia a famous historian who's known as Ibn Khaldun. So, and Ibn Khaldun, he has written what we call the introduction. I have the book, but not here next to me. It's a nice and interesting book, and a lot of current and contemporary historians, they do rely on that book for their research and for writing. And it has been translated to English, and I've used it in my bachelor degree and master's degree dissertation to talk about historicism and new historicism, where we can talk about the different versions and how history can have an influence on what is going now. You talked about the Arab Spring. You know, it is seen differently from those who live it. Let's say North Africa, it's like the domino effect for us. And for how people learned about it and how people see it in the news, how it is being told by others. You know, we've seen everything like happening as Tunisians. And now, let's say the new generation is starting to write about it, starting to take record of what happened. But it's kind of subjective, objective. It depends on how people see it and perceive it. But still, it's an interesting topic. History is amazing. And there is a famous quote by Chinua Achebe, if you know it, the story is our escort, without it we're blind. So if we don't have that story to narrate from one generation to another,
exactly,
who's going to do it? So the younger generation, if they're really kind of cut off from whatever happened in the past, so they will be kind of alienated from the present moment. So it's good to know
totally agree.
Past, present, so that we know where we're heading to the future. And
absolutely, and it's something that I think is the key to understanding. Well, you don't know where you can go, and you barely know where you are if you don't know where you've been. You don't know why these two countries have a conflict. As a bystander, how could you possibly even begin to help? And the only way to find that out is to look into their history.
And read it with a critical mindset.
Yes.
Not just read it, assume, and that's it, because it's full of sometimes
holes.
It's full of stereotypes. It's full of selective memory. It's full of it's like even a game that I do it in class, and I'm sure a lot of teachers say we just do this. It's like the Chinese whispers, the famous game.
Sure.
So I use it to teach not history in class, but to teach kind of particular whenever it fits into my lesson. So I give my students kind of a sentence, a prompt to just read it and try to repeat this. The initial version is a kind of way different from the final one. So that is in the meantime, imagine history and facts. So what can happen in that case? But it's interesting. But if ever you write something, please do share it with me on history, even on a blog or anything.
One of the things that I want to do eventually, after I write the book, or even simultaneously while I write the book, is I want to take my skills in technology and computers and how it applies to educational technology, edtech, and actually create sort of a multifaceted approach to getting information out, not just to the teachers that I would train for my method, but for the students who would actually study under me. And one of them is the idea that with the advent of artificial intelligence and read aloud technologies, to actually write blog pieces that are designed for them to actually read, to learn from, not just for language, but also for other things too. But writing a blog, I could probably write a blog piece about that someday when I actually do start a blog.
Yeah, I'm sure that will be amazing content. And as I told you in the beginning, so you are someone who's very experienced at all levels. So I guess anyone will be learning from you, be it reading a blog post or attending one of your webinars. And so glad, Jose, that I'm interacting with you in this podcast. And thank you.
I feel humbled when you say stuff like that, but thank you very much. I don't know if it's all true, but okay, thank you.
No, but honestly, so because being knowledgeable about something and being humble about this is something that I really appreciate, because sometimes people, they just have a lot of things to say, and just because of the attitude is not really appropriate, you say no, it's okay, I can learn this from a book and better not do it that way. But the way you do it is I can't wait being a trainee in your class, or a student with this attitude. I think that's one of the things teachers should adopt, is whatever information we'll be having, it doesn't make us in a better position than others, because it's available online nowadays. The way we convey it, is what makes the difference.
Especially too with the advent of new technologies, as I was mentioning about artificial intelligence, the monopoly that some people, or a certain type of monopoly on a certain piece of information that others may have taken advantage of in the past to base a certain to get some profit from their ability to control a certain kind of information. I think that model of operation is going to become less and less common, because information itself is just so easy to get from, like you just said, I don't want to study from you. I would rather just learn it from a book. But if you find somebody, where you think, well, I could just read from a book, but I would actually like to study with him, that's what the new sort of real value will be in the coming decades as artificial intelligence and information conveyance becomes so much more widespread. The ability to actually send a message, to deliver a message in a way that touches people as people. Otherwise, just write a book, and then I don't have to listen to your squeaky voice.
Mm-hmm. And
Your squeaky voice.
I'm sorry. Yeah. How far do you think this is applicable in your class most specifically? And let me reframe the question: is that as a teacher, so that to let our students be the best version of themselves,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of mindset should we adopt? What's the best strategy, let's say, for novice teachers? So for example, they got all the training in the world, so they got certified according to the teaching criteria. But once they get into the classroom, they still have some difficulties to kind of navigate through the classroom dynamics. So what do you think should be the best piece of advice? Or maybe your special formula. How do you usually do it in class?
I don't know about a special formula, but one thing that I kind of note here in Japan specifically is there is still, and I'm still surprised that it still exists, but maybe it's because I hang out with older professors. There is still quite a large segment of the university teaching community, less so the full-timers, the tenured professors, as it is with the part-timers, but some full-timers too, although it's a mix between the two part-timers and the full-timers. There was a large segment of the university teaching community in Japan that teaches language acquisition or foreign language acquisition, but who themselves as professors do not speak a second language, which I find just so odd. How do you expect any of your students to actually see you as a legitimate conveyor of your experiences and your abilities and your knowledge in language acquisition? Okay, so I noticed that there are a lot of teachers that still don't actually have what I can say is second language skill. And it just makes me wonder if really, probably there are some teachers who can give a lot of, good instructions in the class, but it must make it that much harder to empathize with your students in terms of what they're feeling or the anxiety they might have, or the real problems in understanding the language, especially, as I mentioned before, how different English is from Japanese. If that particular teacher doesn't actually have any experience in picking up any language, much less the L1 of the students. And I think empathy itself in any form, suddenly becoming fluent in your students' L1, of course, is a very difficult thing. And that's a pretty difficult goal if you haven't already reached it. But if even beyond that, just learning to be more empathic to your students, not just sympathy, but empathy, understanding what their problems are. I think that, if anything, is maybe the one thing that I can say that doesn't get talked about enough.
Yes. And I guess empathy should be employed at all levels, not even in the classroom. Generally speaking, nowadays people are judgmental. They, unfortunately, so. But others, on the other side, they're just trying to empathize, like you said, more than sympathize, put in oneself in someone else's shoes, try to understand what's happening. Because especially in the classroom, I'm going to talk back about the academic life. If any student is in your classroom, I guess he or she or they are in the confines of how safe is it as a classroom first?
Right.
How inclusive is it as a classroom? Before even opening a book, it's like how you deal with them as human beings, and then they can learn from you afterwards. It's not like machine learning. So no, it's like human beings, and having a good rapport is important so that they can understand what we're saying as teachers. And whether we like it or not, so our students, they see us sometimes as idols, as role models, especially younger ones who are still not really kind of did not make it yet to the adult life. So that's the first image they see it about, someone who kind of conveys information to them and they learn from that person. And so that we should do our best to keep it within kind of a nice and safe learning environment so that they can learn from us. And yeah, and this makes us really talk about the set of skills that teachers should have apart from the language competencies, apart from academic achievement and the degrees. And I'm sure that your students, they consider you as a mentor more than just a teacher. No, not really.
Perhaps, I don't know. I don't actually ask them, do you consider me a mentor? But
Yeah.
I get enough feedback from my students that it
Yeah.
seems as if they're comfortable speaking to me.
Mhm.
Mostly because I do teach in L1. I don't
Mhm.
teach in L2. I don't teach in English. I teach mostly in Japanese. And
Oh, really?
for a lot of them, yeah, I'm the very first, yeah, probably for a lot of them, I'm the very first Westerner, Canadian, American, Australian, whatever, that it's brought there to speak and teach as quotation marks, native speaker or an expert speaker, but is teaching in Japanese again as my way to show the students, I know how you feel. Listen to how bad my Japanese is. Listen to how bad my pronunciation is. But what I want to teach you is fluency. Now listen to how fluent I am. I make all kinds of grammatical mistakes, all kinds of pronunciation mistakes, but fluency, as I said, and I try to get this through to the students, is something that's achieved by focusing on fluency, not by focusing on accuracy. And if you do that, then you can get to my level. Once you get to my level, then yeah, it makes sense to learn new words. It makes sense to try to keep a journal. It makes sense to do presentations, because until you get to a level of fluency, nothing else really sticks in language learning.
Yeah, definitely right. Yes. So sometimes at an initial stage, learning a foreign language, we start always first by getting to know first the language, what is it? And then you can't even stop the student every time to correct inaccuracies in grammar, in vocab. So you just let them go with the flow, you let them talk, and then you point out to this as delayed feedback. You can, for example, ask them for how can we express this differently? How do you see this? Do you think this is right? So that is to encourage them to learn and get comfortable speaking the language first. And after this, so comes up, like you said, the accuracy, and then we can correct the inaccuracies meanwhile.
Sure. Unfortunately, in Japan, it's backwards.
Uh-huh.
Complexity and accuracy are the be all and end all of Japanese classrooms, starting from even junior high school third year. And then going on into high school first, second, and third year, everything is about getting everything correct.
Yeah.
And maybe if you're lucky, you'll have the communication class. And the communication class, a lot of students sort of turn their brains off a little bit because they think, oh yeah, that's where we're supposed to speak. But really what's important is like getting the information to pass the test.
Sure.
So the kids know how to game this. They don't really want to spend any more energy in communication class when really the really tough test is coming in the grammar class and the vocabulary class. And so they turn off their brain to the whole idea of learning to actually communicate verbally in the language.
You got me interested in asking you a question when it comes to assessment. So
Sure.
assessment and how it goes like for assessing language and grammar. So does it go like integrated skills, or like do you teach this as a separate set of skills, and then the students, they get assessed in a different language, kind of a test separate from, so what kind of approach do you use in your class?
I use a skills-based approach in the actual conveyance of information, so a skills assessment system. Basically, I give them the challenge of after, and remember, this is all university. I've never had the privilege to actually try to whittle this down to high school level, although I'm sure it could be if I was given a forum to actually do it. But in a typical university semester, that's 16 weeks. So 1 week is the final assessment. There could be a midterm assessment. I don't often do that, but it can be done. But in the final assessment, you take the 15 weeks of the skills that you've built up, being able to speak, quick responses, eye contact, gestures, an ability to psychologically go 180 degrees from what you were taught in high school, which is to think about your grammar, think about your pronunciation and your vocabulary, and to go instead with high-speed speaking, high-speed responses, style and appearance as being more important than any of the complexity or accuracy factors that a lot of students have thought was actually the most important part of language learning. I tell them, no, it's not at this level. At this level, you just want to speak a lot, and you want to know what to do when you don't understand what the other person is saying or the other person doesn't understand you. So what we do is, from all of that time that we spent, me mostly instructing in L1, we start to switch over to L2 environments. It's always an L2 environment when they're in their pair work. The way that verbal classrooms work, they hardly have any time to actually speak in L1. That's one of the major attractions of verbal classrooms. In any case, the assessment is basically they go into groups, 3 or 4 people, they can choose. They can choose their members. I don't say anything unless there's a population problem, extra student or something. And I tell them, you have to do in front of me, while with me listening, but not participating, 2 5-minute English-only conversations, which is actually a lot to ask for Japanese university students. They all look at that assessment and they go, what? You want me to speak English only for 5 minutes? And they go, I've never had to do that. And also too, because it's improvised, no notes, no books, no papers. The topics of the conversation are given from a list of 10, and they're basically everyday topics: music, food, hobbies, sports, Japan, America, high school, just really everyday stuff, the sort of stuff that they would have as a conversation topic with a friend they met at the cafeteria, some foreign exchange student. And they have to somehow find a way to have an improvised conversation, 5 minutes, English only, with high-speed responses, high-speed production, good eye contact, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if they speak any Japanese, they're penalized. And that's actually more than enough of a challenge for them. Some of them have problems. They run out of things to say. They don't know what to do when there's a communication breakdown. And the reason why there were 2 conversations is usually they practice. Oh, yeah. So the first topic of the first conversation, they can choose from the list of 10.
Okay.
But the second topic, I will choose. And I don't tell them what it is until they finish that conversation. So they have to be ready for what happens. The first conversation, they usually will practice. Sometimes they over practice. But the real magic happens in the second conversation. And that's where I see their real skills. And that's where they know that they actually have to come up with improvised, unrehearsed conversations. It works fairly well.
And I have a particular point of view about Japanese culture and the Japanese people and Japanese students. I guess since they are very meticulous and very kind of, they want things to be perfect. And I'm sure that students are adopting the same mindset, wanted to be things to be done within the norms, like wanted to achieve the target, perseverance, so is it right? So is it like
it's close. Of course, you're talking about 18-year-old 19-year-olds who are barely out of high school, and they're not completely developed adult brains, adult minds yet. So there's some kids who are closer to a much more mature concept of what it is that they want and how they approach it with their cultural influences and stuff. But basically, yes, they're much more meticulous about doing things as expected to follow a standard. And that's very Japanese. That's very much the whole idea of following community harmony and doing it the way everybody expects. The problem occurs in language learning when what they perceive as what their community expects actually isn't good for language learning. This is the idea of having the right word, having the right pronunciation, and having the right sentence before you speak.
You even try it, yeah.
You don't say anything until you actually know the right answer. And that is just such a brick wall for them.
It is, it is. They won't be saying anything either in that case.
And that's exactly what happens. And that's exactly the challenge in front of me. And that's what inspired me to actually create verbal classrooms.
I have another question related to foreign language teachers who might consider relocating to teach in Japan. Do you think they should be knowledgeable about the Japanese language 100%, or would it be a challenge like to use only English in the classroom to teach English? So how do you see it from your perspective?
I think it is always a plus to be able to speak the language of the country where you live, number one.
Yeah, sure.
But when you say relocate, is that a temporary relocation? Are you here to basically just sort of, sample life a little bit in Japan, and then maybe after 3 years return home with that experience and maybe write a couple of research papers? Or are you thinking of actually?
As it depends. It depends. For example, if it's an exchange program, so it will be for a limited period of time, and if it's a full-time job contract with known and permanent responsibilities and tasks, so that the teacher will be living for real in Japan. So two point of views are really valid here.
So in that case, in either case, it's always good if you can actually speak the language, especially if you're living somewhere like I am, where nobody here speaks English.
It's English.
There are actually not that many people, even in most parts of Japan, except for the really big cities, where you can easily walk around without being able to speak Japanese. But certainly here in the countryside, nobody speaks English. I could force people to do that, but that's really imperialistic of me. So language is a good thing. Now, the whole thing about using L1 in the classroom, I do it because it's my style. I could do verbal classrooms in English only, but then I don't know if I would have the same success of being as empathic with my students, and to give them an opportunity to ask me the questions that they can't ask of a teacher who doesn't speak, or out of policy doesn't want to speak Japanese. And they've had so much of that in high school, in junior high school. There are a lot of those foreign exchange sort of placement teachers who come in temporarily, and most of them don't speak Japanese. And the idea is, well, then you have to find a way to communicate, so the students will be forced to speak in English. That actually doesn't happen. They're not forced to speak in English. What they do instead is they just don't speak
at all.
Now, there might be 2 or 3 really keen students that want to do that, but most of them just don't. So I don't know if that really worked. That never really worked in Japan. The whole idea, well, if we bring in all of these people that don't speak any this was the idea back in the 80s and even in the 90s. We bring in all of these people that don't speak any Japanese, then Japanese people will have to speak English to them. And it never worked out that way. I don't think so. In terms of just overall advice that I would give to someone who's thinking of relocating, learn the language. 2, figure out how long you want to be here before you start thinking about staying here permanently. And if you are thinking of coming here permanently, the kind of work that you could expect where you're working at a university, that is really, really hard to obtain anymore, unless you've got a proper CELTA or a Delta certificate, or you have an MA in some degree, preferably education, or in English or foreign language acquisition. But really the best thing to do if you want to make it easy for yourself to get a university position is to have a PhD, preferably in education.
Yeah, sure. That's what they usually mention, even like preferably a PhD or an MA in education, or sometimes it's like in linguistics, specialized in major things, or the CELTA and the Delta. So, and I guess it's...
I say that, sorry to interrupt. I say that only because up to until about 15 years ago, there was always a story, and it was true, that any idiot could come in here and start making money hand over fist because they're fluent English speakers. That is not the story anymore. That just won't happen anymore unless you're with a program, but you're not just going to come here as a backpacker and then just suddenly start making $50-$60 an hour without any kind of teaching ability.
Of course.
You know, those days are gone.
Yeah, things that have evolved, you know, and even the application form and the recruitment process makes it clear, so that it doesn't have only to do with the degrees and the certificates and the demo lesson. So things have evolved. So, you know, competency speaks louder than those degrees, you know. So because getting degrees and just learning for assessment or learning to get the best grade, and does not necessarily mean that you or any person can be a good teacher. So the practice makes a difference. And if you put someone into a classroom, a real class, that what makes the difference for from an average teacher, let's say, to an experienced teacher. And that's why the training, like a CELTA and a Delta and an MA and TESOL, so those really hands-on practice and hands-on training, let's say, makes it easier even for experienced teachers to kind of get acquainted with the teaching strategies. I can tell about myself, for example, my pre-CELTA experience and my post-CELTA experience is way different. So even though I was a university teacher, so overall experience is 15 years, but I used to teach for 11 years before getting my CELTA. And after that, my teaching practice changed because I learned new strategies and I learned new techniques, how to improve the experience, the learning experience in my class. So it's like, and I'm still learning. So the Delta is on my prospective strategies. I have already an MA. That makes it good. I've enrolled in a PhD program, but now I'm thinking more about PhD in education more than getting specialized in a particular style, let's say. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you, José, on that point. And it's good to ask that what I say to my colleagues or to my community is that if you're interested in something or in trying a new career path or career shift, or maybe starting over after retirement, so you can always ask what goes well, how it usually goes in that particular country if you're really considering to relocate in the case, and adjust accordingly if it doesn't work so well. So things are, you can still be a teacherpreneur, like we say, so you can be teacher online and you can have your own style, and you can get students worldwide. So yeah.
One thing that I will put out as a warning, though, I just was reminded about this. There are people like you who are obviously fluent in English, talented with languages, and have the qualifications on paper, and also have the classroom experience and the knowledge of how to conduct a good classroom, and yet still will find it more difficult than, let's say, someone with maybe slightly less than what you have. Somebody who has a master's in finance, doesn't know CELTA, doesn't have a Delta, never really studied education. They have a master's, but it's got nothing to do with education. But they came from America or they came from England. And that phenomenon is more common in Japan than it should be. I know.
Even here. Even here.
Really?
Natives, yeah. It's the case, yeah.
Wow. So even for somebody like you would probably be at a disadvantage if you had similar qualifications, but the other person just happened to be from Canada.
Yeah, regardless of the nationality, be it like, let's say, from an English-speaking country, sometimes it's a privilege, even in my country. Like, I can have all the qualifications that I talked about, and someone is a native from a particular English-speaking country can have the privilege, let's say, the plus one, so that they can get hired instead of me. And the opposite way around, I'm a native speaker, I'm an Arabic native speaker. So if I'll be traveling to vice versa, I mean, I can't have that privilege teaching Arabic simply because I come from from Arabic speaking country. Get the meaning? So I think here the dynamic is like being a native speaker in a particular language doesn't really give the person the privilege over someone. So I encourage non-native speakers to learn the language, to teach the language, because sometimes non-natives they do practice, put the effort more. This doesn't mean that natives they're not. We're learning from each other. I think it should complement. We should complement each other. For example, a native speaker knows things that people they use it on a daily basis in an English-speaking country, the things that I don't, simply because I don't live in that country. And whereas I can know new techniques that I've studied, that I've applied in my classroom, that I can share with a native speaker who got an MA in finance, let's say, not in English. So I think that's collaborative, and it should not be discriminatory in getting a job.
It shouldn't be. That sounds ideal, with the sort of a team thing. And often you will find staff rooms like that in Japan, but too often, which doesn't mean often, but too often, you will find that there isn't that kind of collaboration, nor there is a desire for collaboration. For a lot of teachers, unfortunately, it's basically clock in, clock out. Thanks for all the money. I'm going home now, kind of thing. It's not, there are still, I think, too many teachers that I see around here that are not honing their craft as true professionals, and still basically just picking up the money.
Yeah, I guess that is discussed, I guess, and being tackled in teacher associations. And I've noticed that this topic is part of webinars and of discussions, panel discussions, native speakers, non-native speakers, advocacy for each one of them. And I think that is still in the process. That is a topic that will be dealt with like forever. And
absolutely,
I hope, one day that won't be a criteria to kind of discard an application form simply because one is not a native speaker, but has all the degrees in the world to get that particular job simply because they have the qualifications.
It's much better than it used to be here, though. It's much better than it used to be.
Yeah. But hopefully, I'm being optimistic with this, and I hope that things will get better in the future. If not in my generation, maybe in the future,
Well, they usually tend towards that. I mean, if you read writers like Steven Pinker and other writers, that generally we tend to be very pessimistic. The news tends to make us that way because it sells website hits and newsprint. But generally, I tend to kind of agree with Steven Pinker. Things generally are getting better. We're always on the verge of something, but we always were on the verge of something destroying civilization, even back, in the Dark Ages. We almost lost civilization in the Dark Ages. I don't think we would have that problem now. We could have lost in so many ways, but things are generally getting better.
I hope so. By the way, Jose, I've noticed a kind of a quote. Is it just in the background? This is your life. Life is short.
This is a poster that I saw. I think it was from a Facebook post, maybe about 10 years ago. And the poster was a photograph in the Facebook post. And I read the post and I said, that's a really cool thing. And this thing is called the Holstee Manifesto, Holstee, the Holstee Manifesto. And it's basically just a slogan on probably that's very fitting for the whole idea of Ikigai, actually.
What does it say, please?
Would you like me to read it?
Of course, yes. If you want, if you can.
Well, here we go. I don't know if the microphone will be able to pick me up.
It's okay. It's
but okay, so just from the very top, and it's typographically too, it has a really interesting layout, but it goes like this. This is your life. Do what you love and do it often. If you don't like something, change it. If you don't like your job, quit. If you don't have enough time, stop watching TV. If you are looking for the love of your life, stop. They will be waiting for you when you start doing things you love.
Like,
Stop overanalyzing. Life is simple. All emotions are beautiful. When you eat, appreciate every last bite. Open your mind, arms, and heart to new things and people. We are united in our differences, and the next person you see, what their passion is, and share your inspiring dream with them. Travel often. Getting lost will help you find yourself. Some opportunities only come once. Seize them. Life is about the people you meet and the things you create with them. So go out and start creating. Life is short. Live your dream and share your passion.
oh my God, that should be that is a manifesto, by the way.
That is the Holstein Manifesto. Yeah.
I should have that. Please, can you send me a copy of the poster or just a photo?
I can send you a link where you can purchase it.
Yes.
Just put it in the frame.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and
I
it was
like
really
to have that.
strange too. I found that post around, I don't know, I guess now that would be about 2013, 2015 or so. Thought it was really cool. I bought the poster, I framed it
Yeah.
on the 2015, and it's always been hanging there. And then suddenly the pandemic hits,
Okay.
and I start doing online classes, and a
Mhm.
lot of my students actually noticed it. And it would often become like, Mr. Cruz, what does that actually say behind you? Because they see the one word,
In life.
or if they expand my picture really big, they go, wow, that's kind of interesting. And they ask me to talk about it. It's been the
I
topic.
find it interesting, actually, and I find it even it fits and goes well with the Ikigai. And since you mentioned it, I'm interested to know more about the Ikigai from what you think about it. Not as a jingle word, the way we see it in media, but Ikigai as it should be in Japan. How is it there?
As it should be. I mean, Ikigai, the whole concept of it is very personal, and how you interpret the concept of it is something that's as personal as anyone who happens to be French, and they look at the term raison d'être, or if you happen to be a Canadian or an American and you think about the purpose of life. For some people, the whole idea of thinking about the purpose of life is kind of a luxury that they can't afford because they're homeless and they're still trying to figure out when they're
What
going to
is
eat.
life first? Yeah.
What is life, and how can I get out from under the rain?
Mhm.
But every language has a term for that. Ikigai, I think, just got picked up by Western ears, and it does sound really interesting. And Iki, which means life or living, paired with the other part of that word, gai. Gai is really interesting because it has so many translations. Treasure, or
Purpose.
not long, purpose. And there's a bunch of actual translations for them. I should have opened my dictionary earlier, and
I will. I will check it
yeah,
online.
the Japanese English dictionary for gai, there are a lot of ways to translate it. So there are a lot of nuances within the word itself. But
Yeah, I
when
noticed
it's
that.
paired with ikigai as a word, it basically means your life's purpose or your life's reason. Now, in Japan, I don't know. I only speak a little bit of French, but I imagine raison d'être, when it hits the ears of a French person, doesn't have, particularly magical meaning the way it might have with
I'll
someone
tell
who
you.
hears it
Yeah,
the
I'll
first
tell
time
you.
in English.
I'll tell you about this because I have a French background. So la raison d'être, it's like the thing which makes you want to wake up in the morning and have that purpose for that day, not only your life. C'est la raison. So it's like not the reason, but let's say the motive. Not the motivation. It's like what's inside, like what you feel as a gut feeling. So that is what I want to do. That is what I want to say. That is what I want to go through. And in Arabic, it's the same. الغاية من الحياة، الهدف من الحياة. So الحياة, it's life. That's the Arabic word for life, la vie in French. So, and for some people, like you said, it's a luxury. So, and for others, it's like they just can barely survive the day. So they don't think about ikigai as a driving purpose, as long as they think about what they're going to eat and where they're going to sleep at night. So I think Ikigai can be achieved at a particular level once someone has achieved the self, you know, even in Maslow, the self-actualization kind of
Yes.
step. Once you've reached the whole level, you know, you can then speak about what is Ikigai. Once you get a rooftop, once you get clothes to wear, once you get food to eat on your table, once you get, so once you taking care of your health, what to eat, having a good diet as well, and survive and all that. Once you achieve a particular kind of level in education, so people will be starting to think, what's next? I can barely think that people who still haven't achieved the previous steps can think even about a purpose in life. Maybe they can think about it maybe in negative terms, sometimes even at the verge of, let's say, breakdown. Sometimes, you know, the nihilistic, they just ask themselves that existential question. What am I here for? Same question. Yeah, the point. So we have two kind of poles, you know, that kind of negative, extreme positive, extreme negative. So the Ikigai is like you said, it's not it's a journey, but not a journey at the same time. It's natural, I guess. But only those who are aware of this, which is life, what is life, can speak about its purpose. Okay, the one who has an amazing life can talk about a purpose, or the one who has a kind of crappy life, you know, what am I doing in my life? So they can start to ask about it. What am I here for? So I think those two kind of people, they really kind of reflect on what is Ikigai. Yeah,
I was maybe almost in the latter category until about, maybe about 15 years ago. I was just sort of floating through life. I found myself, even though I had already discovered at that point that I had a really good teaching method, I was a little bit frustrated because even though I would try to present about it and I would try to take it to national conferences and such, that there wasn't a lot of interest from about my presentation proposal, and it would be rejected. And I thought, well, you know, it's good for me. I like teaching with it, and it works well for me, and it works well for some of the people that I've talked about it, but it doesn't seem like I'll get a lot of attention with it. So I'll just keep doing my job. Even though, like I said earlier in the interview, I didn't really plan to actually come here and be a teacher. It's just something that happened. I ended up coming here. I met a girl. We got married. Unfortunately, the marriage didn't succeed, but I managed to stay in the country anyway. It was a good job, and I just stayed with the flow of things. But because of the fact that, you know, it was working well enough, that was something that kept me fed. But I realized maybe about, like I said, about 10 or 15 years ago, I was sitting there going, what is the purpose of my life? What am I supposed to be doing here? And I thought, you know what, you know, thinking back to that whole history I was saying before, like I've always liked being in front of people, and I've always liked the idea of being a teacher. I am a teacher. I've actually achieved a lot of the things that I've ever wanted. In terms of the material things that I wanted, I collected them around me. I don't have a lot of needs, but I wanted to own my own house. I wanted to have a particular kind of car. That's all done now. And I thought, okay, well, now what do I do? And I think instead of the whole idea of going through Ikigai as a concept, because in Japan, to be honest with you, it's not really on the lips of all Japanese people about going through Ikigai and going through the whole concept. What am I good at? What can I make money at? What does the world need from me? What do I love? That
it
whole
doesn't,
diagram.
it doesn't work that way.
It's not really a thing in
Not
Japan.
really, yeah.
It's a good thing, and it wouldn't be a bad thing for everyone to do it, but it's not a thing in Japan. what I found helped me focus enough so that then it gave me a renewed energy to start doing things like making my website, really trying hard again to present my ideas on verbal classrooms. And now I have a fair amount of success and a fair amount of attention for the method itself. Wasn't so much about finding my purpose, because my purpose is so unclear. I kind of wanted to be a teacher, maybe, kind of, sort of. Well,
Yeah.
I'm kind of good at being in front of people, kind of, maybe, sort of. But what I think made it come into focus was the idea of, well, what can I do to help people? And I think, when you're thinking about Ikigai as a way to define your purpose and your happiness, it might still fall into the trap that you come into pleasing primarily yourself. And defining your happiness is what, and of course it should be what makes you happy, but I think there's a greater degree of happiness to be achieved when you think about how to merge that goal of becoming happy with service to others.
Yes.
That's when I think it really comes together. And there is nothing to, now I don't want to say fear, but there's nothing wrong with not having some kind of this great match of the Venn diagrams, all four of the Venn diagrams coming to the center and going, wow, that's it. I think my Venn diagram said that I should be a professor of philosophy. I think if you looked at it, said I should be a professor of philosophy. And I said, well, number one, I don't think I want to be a professor of philosophy, but let's say you go, oh, I should be a professor of philosophy. That's it. That's what I should do.
No, but maybe, Jose, maybe you have those skills that can make you a good
I think I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I do. I know how to research. I know how to present. I know how to discuss Socratic form and dialectical form. All of the things. And I actually enjoy discussions on philosophy. I could, but what I was trying to say was that if you can't achieve that, for example,
it's not the end of life. Yeah,
it's right. I don't have a PhD. To go and chase a PhD in philosophy would mean uprooting my entire life right now and chasing that, which wouldn't be a bad thing to do. But I'm actually in service of others right now as it is. And maybe this is the place where I can be the most effective. While I'm actually still kind of happy in my life as it is right now.
That's the point. That's the point. So like you said, you've summed up everything. So you said it's not only about personal and kind of selfish happiness, it's like about unconditional happiness, it's like happiness for yourself and for others, as long as you as a teacher, you are in good service for your students. So that makes you that's the output. So like we say, teachers, they don't teach for the income, they teach for the outcome. So that is, we need the income to survive.
We need a good, fair income too, actually. I just want to make that clear to everyone.
I know.
Strike if you have to, everyone.
I know, but not really if
but I know what you mean.
I've taught, look, Jose, in different kind of work environments where the income was not my first purpose and initial target. I took that challenge because I just wanted to teach within that context, within that particular cultural background. Yeah, or just wanted to teach and try what is teaching. So I remember my first teaching experience, like I got paid like something really trivial. It's like compared to what should a teacher get as a minimum pay range. So, but I did that because I wanted to experiment. So I was at that time still preparing and drafting my MA master's degree dissertation, and I was not even thinking about becoming a teacher at all. So that something was outside of my kind of thinking. So I wanted to be an interpreter. I was impressed, like how well can people shift from one language to another. So I like translation, not at the level of language, only at the level of language, but at the cultural aspect as well. Because translation goes beyond from translating a word for word. So there's the cultural
nuance.
Nuances, and there's what we call the fallacy of translation sometimes, We just translate the word as it is, but the spirit, the essence of it cannot be translatable. Just like the word ikigai. A lot
Absolutely.
of people,
Yep.
they're finding kind of difficulties to translate the word guy because it's untranslatable.
It's very hard to translate. Yeah.
It is. And there are things that are meant to be lived sometimes, not understood. Since you can really feel that, since you can really pursue whatever is it, like being happy about what you cook and eat, being happy about what you do in life, being happy about your daily routine, even that, kind of enjoying your cup of coffee and just kind of watching your favorite series. So that's the word. There's the word hygge as well, which is it comes from the Danish kind of jingle word, which means like you can enjoy a moment and live in that particular moment and you enjoy it. But as long as you're happy, so that's what I believe, that makes self-satisfaction.
And also too, the whole idea, as you were saying before, about it being a journey, not a destination, that it's a dynamic thing.
Yeah.
That you'll go through phases where your ikigai at that phase was that, and you're perfectly happy. But life will change, life will move, and it might require that you change your perspective on whatever your purpose or whatever your next goal is. But I think being prepared for those changes and being prepared for the dynamism of life is something that is very important. And I should be, for anyone who's looking for their ikigai, is the idea, well, I'm going to find an ikigai, not the ikigai. Some people might be lucky and they'll find that one overarching, all-encompassing purpose.
Yeah.
But for some people, maybe it's good to be flexible in the idea that, well, in my 30s, it was this, in my 50s, it was this. And when I was 70, it was something else.
You want me to tell you the truth? That's something that I've been doing ever since I came across the word. Is just I have an ikigai every month. It's not a life purpose. So just have fun, enjoy going through the questions myself, not necessarily within the Venn diagram, just the questions. What do you want to do now? What are the things you can do now at that particular moment that can help your community or your family or people who live around you? And every time I come across a different ikigai every month. So it's not like
really, it literally gives you a completely different job every time.
Every time. And I had different ikigais, let's say one in journalism and broadcasting. So that's why I'm doing the podcast actually, because the Ikigai podcast is itself an ikigai for me.
Good.
And, yeah. And what else? Teaching. There is one related to arts, creativity, and acting, and theater and drama. And another one was writing. So I had different ikigais. So, and I think that I'll be having multiple ones. And I think that's like you said, it's the journey. It's not a destination.
It's an entire process.
We
and
change.
once you think that the process is finished, that might be a mistake.
There's something wrong at the time.
There's something wrong there. Yeah. It really is a journey. It isn't a destination. And once you think that you've arrived, really?
There's something related to this for some people. So I'm just going now to speak, generally speaking, not necessarily linked to teachers and language teachers. Just going to speak about this from a philosophical, let's say, point of view. Since we're both share that on the philosophy landscape. Do you think people who have achieved the material kind of achievement, success, their perception to their ikigai, it's different? So in life is beyond that, because look, it's good to have the necessary, the average point where people can survive. But what do you think of people who make that hustle kind of thing? They want to achieve success, whatever it takes, at the expense of their health, at the expense of their personal life, at the expense. So would it be good? Family life, yeah. What do you think should be adjusted in that way? And because I've tried to change their mindset, honestly, because I have in my entourage, in my surrounding, people like that. where not necessarily, I'm not talking about family, but friends and acquaintances, money is the only criteria for success. What do you think is the essential criteria that should be set for success? Yeah.
Well, I think most of it is written in that manifesto.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the problem that you're pointing to is quite pervasive. The idea that people want to succeed and what they see around them as being touted as this is what you want, daily on TV, in social media, even in music. The idea of achieving countable wealth is something that is a very big part of capitalist society and the kind of civilization that we've kind of found ourselves in now. And trying to change the minds of others away from it is actually quite a difficult thing, because it is something that everyone sort of takes for granted. That, well, you want to have more cars, you want to have bigger houses. You see even the people that you admire, Hollywood stars or royalty or corporate types like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, and all of the material wealth that they're surrounding themselves with, and all of the power and attention that they get. And it's very hard as a young person, or maybe even as a full-grown adult in their 30s or so, to say, well, how can you argue with that? How can you not want that? And I think what I think of it is that, number one, I think people who really just want to keep amassing and acquiring more wealth are doing it not just for the outer approval of society itself, to say, wow, you've succeeded, because you've got $10 billion and he's only got 5. It's something else missing inside of themselves, that they need extrinsic motivation, or extrinsic approval, validation, as opposed to an intrinsic validation that says, I did what I need to do, I've helped others, and I don't need to be told by other members of society that I'm successful, nor do I need to show it. So the need to show, the need to control, the need to acquire, the need for extrinsic validation, those are all pathologies. Those are all psychological pathologies. And if you look into psychology, it'll tell you, well, you have this tendency to collect comic books because it translates into the idea that you feel that you need control in your life. So all of those things can be traced back to certain pathologies traceable in psychology. Unfortunately, our civilization and our capitalist mode of material distribution values that. And it's hard to get other people to change their minds, because as soon as they stop talking to you and they head home after they say goodbye to you at the bar, they turn on the TV, they look at social media, and they see exactly the opposite of what you were trying to convey.
Yeah, that's mass media, and I guess ASA, like ideological state apparatus, the ideology that goes beyond and behind that thinking, in books, in movies, in songs, in everyday life. So especially for teenagers, so they can get the validation. So I encountered this while teaching the career day within the career theme, especially teaching middle schoolers and high school students. When you ask students, what do you want to, what's your future job? What do you think? What will be your dream job? And most of the answers are linked to materialistic validation, is like, jobs that they have kind of a protocol, a kind of, white collar jobs. So that's, I want to be a doctor, or no, most of the cases now I want to be a YouTuber, I'm a gamer, and but I totally let them express themselves, but I'm just wondering in the background, what made them think so? What is the purpose? Parents sometimes? No, not necessarily. Media, friends, influence, social media nowadays, TikTok, easy money.
It's all of that though, isn't it? I think it's all of that. Even their parents, if you think about their parents, the word parent itself is a special position, but literally just 20 years ago, most of these parents themselves were teenagers.
Yes.
There's really and how long has this been going on, where we see material wealth as being the be all and end all of society's ideas of goals? Well, it goes back about, I don't know, 500, 600, maybe 800 years. So the idea that parents should have any different values than their children I think that's unreasonable to expect.
Mm.
Who runs social media? Well, the same people who raise these children who we're trying to teach differently. And there aren't many people who are awake to the problem, and all we can do really is just keep trying to provide examples of it and keep pointing to the idea that there are alternatives to life besides just trying to be Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or Kim Kardashian, because that really is kind of an empty lifestyle. And I hope eventually those voices become more widespread, because without it, the civilizations and the lifestyles that we have right now are simply unsustainable on this planet.
Yeah, definitely agree. Especially especially for teenagers, because the reference point that they're seeing are those superstars and models online on social media. Why should I work and get a job since I can make easy money on social media? So.
But they think it's
They
so
think
easy.
it is. Yeah. And I think we'll be having shallow kind of people in the future if we don't raise awareness as educators.
I hate to agree with you, but yeah.
Yes.
Or at least maybe not shallow. It's not an absolute thing.
Yeah.
Slightly shallower. I mean, our parents themselves, when they were our age, were probably saying the same thing back then. Oh, these kids these days, they're
yes.
the older generation always has the same complaints about the younger generation.
The next one. Yeah.
You guys don't know what you're doing. All this music is crap. Oh, what is this?
And their age, they used to wear like a torn jeans.
Yeah, that's right. They would walk uphill to school both ways, and all of these complaints. So I think, but yeah, especially with the challenges of how pervasive social media is and how it actually takes control of young minds in a way that we've never seen before. The influence the battle between the influence of, say, television and literature back in the 50s is so much more one-sided towards social media and literature here in the 2020s now, that it's ludicrous to even think about comparing them.
And there's another side, José, which is like parents who did not achieve their dreams, like to become whatsoever. Say they just impose this on kids, and they just project their unfulfilled dreams. And here is it: you're going to learn piano, you're going to learn how to be a ballerina, and so I don't think it's suitable to do, and especially nowadays, we can't impose things on children.
There's something to be said for encouraging children to, take up music or to take up sports.
Sure.
But if you're forcing them to do it when they said, I don't want to play baseball, or I really hate the piano, then
we shouldn't
lay off, let them. You should. That's actually a big problem in Japan. There isn't as much time for children to simply play, because they have after school activities, they have after school clubs, they have club activities on the weekends, and their time is so stuffed with between studying and not intramural after school activities and extra activities plus cram school that children aren't used to the idea of free play. Just having fun with each other on the playground as it would be expected to be normal. Yeah.
That's good to know, because look, the idea that I have about Japan is like the most brilliant people, and I think it's the case because I've seen the educational system, how it goes on TV, like a lot of people, they went to film documentaries and talk about how it goes. So, and I've seen a lot of positive aspects, like, for example, how to teach the students to keep a classroom clean, how they do that on a daily basis, how to be self-disciplined. it's amazing in that sense. And a lot of schools nowadays, be it here or in my country or in the region, so they're starting to adopt that mindset of teaching the discipline, especially self-discipline, and but not to the extent of not having fun, not enjoying life, and
I
because
think there are a lot of things. Sorry to
yeah, it's
interrupt.
okay. No,
Please
no,
continue.
it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's fine.
I think there are a lot of things that Japan can give to the world in
Mhm,
terms of education, and you've noticed a couple of them, but there's
mhm.
still a lot of things that Japan can learn from Tunisia, or specifically Finland. You
Yeah.
know,
No homework
the Scandinavian
policy.
countries have,
Yeah.
right? The education principles there really do need to be adopted to a much higher degree here, because what Japan has been doing for the past, what, well, for all the time that I've been here, is basically a mirror of what they've been doing since the end of the war. And it's just not working anymore. And it's just too slow to change. But that's a complaint that a lot of countries can have. I do think, though, that this country is on the verge of a lot of social precipices if it doesn't start to adopt real change very soon.
Mhm, mhm. Now I'm going to, before we wrap up, Jose, because it has been
Okay.
really an amazing episode, and I'm really so happy. Ever since we started
I'm
recording,
glad.
like yeah, I'm expressing this, but excuse me, but I'm happy every time that I exchange and interact with a colleague and I learn things. And today I learned a lot of things from you. And I have not a question, but I'm just going to ask you, since I like
Sure.
languages so much, can you
Sure.
give a piece of advice in Japanese and translate it to English? And
Okay.
like kind of a motto, something. And I would like to start kind of learning this from you, like looking for wise words, kind of, and just like the poster, you have it in the background, and because I like the lyricism in the Japanese language. So,
Uh-huh.
but it will be kind of you to translate it afterwards so that I understand what you're talking about.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
first of all, a warning. If you're
Okay.
expecting to hear wisdom from me, I
Oh
don't know if I'm going to be
God.
disappointed. But I just want to get this straight. You want me to say it first in Japanese and
As
then,
you like, as you like, as you like, as you
okay,
like.
good. Okay. So first, let me decide. Yeah, I think I'll go with that. Okay, so shall I?
Yeah, sure, of course.
言われたのはね、何が、言語を勉強したい人にアドバイス何かありますかと言われたら、単純ですけど、多分ね、僕でも、これが単純と言われても本当に大切なことが、その毎日の練習。毎日何かすれば、習慣になって、そしてその習慣から本当に自分の日常になるまで、毎日毎日何か、言語の勉強、スポーツを上手くなること、料理すること、ピアノを弾くこととか、毎日毎日しないと、やっぱりね、その進歩があまり出てこないし、それが大切。でも、どういうふうに毎日できるように、まず自分の好きなことを選んで、ちゃんとそのものが本当に好き、その好きならやっぱり毎日したくなる。で、毎日すれば、で、それで、本当に進歩が出ると思います。
I'm going to do
Okay.
the same in Arabic, but now I'll just wait for the translation. Subtitles, please.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you understand what I just said?
I caught a few words like kind of advice, piano, those words. And there's something similar to arigato because I know that the word arigato. So there, yeah, a few things.
Maybe. Okay. So
Okay.
this is basically what I said. Okay. So if you're asking me for advice on what it is that a language learner can do,
Yeah.
basically, it seems like a pretty typical thing to say, but it's whether or not you do something every day, whether or not you take something up daily. And to do something daily is to turn it into a habit. And once you have that habit, then it can become a routine. And once it becomes a routine, then it's something that you just cannot separate from your daily life. And that is really the key to success. But it's very important to choose something that you love. If you're trying to learn how to speak English, but you don't really want to learn how to speak English, you're never going to get anywhere. First, decide for yourself, do I really want to learn this language? And if you do, you're going to make a commitment. But the easiest thing to do daily is something that you want to do. Now, you can force yourself to do something that's unpleasant, maybe, but will it be something, number one, that makes you happy? Probably not, because it's unpleasant for you, but you still might get really good at it. But the best thing that you can do for yourself is choose something that you love, do it daily, and that's the key to success.
Great. Okay, now, thank you very much. So the translation in Arabic. So I'm just kidding. I'm just going to say something similar.
Oh, really? I was looking forward to it.
Yeah. And I'm just going to translate this into English afterwards, so that everyone will understand.
Cool.
To language learners, okay. إلى أي إنسان يريد تعلم لغة أجنبية لكي تتمكن من تعلم لغة أجنبية ولتتقنها، أول شيء هو التعرف على ثقافة الحضارة الأجنبية، ثم الإرادة لتعلم ذلك عن طريق الممارسة اليومية، يعني تتكلم هذه اللغة مع كل إنسان عاش في تلك البلاد أو ولد هناك، يعني هي مسقط رأسه الإنسان. Like we say in English, practice makes perfect. So now the translation is that to any language learner who wants to practice the language, the first thing you should do is that get acquainted with the language and try to practice this with native speakers if you can, with the context, and try to develop kind of learning habits. And with those learning habits, you can get disciplined and you can achieve, let's say, a good fluency in that language. So I guess my translation is not really accurate, but I did my best. Yeah, I did my best. I tried it. So
it's a good message anyway.
Yeah. I'm not practicing my Arabic, the standard Arabic, because sometimes my dialect, the Tunisian dialect gets in between, and I'm not really practicing well the standard Arabic. I'm good at that, I know, but I can.
The Tunisian dialect could be understood by someone who only knows the Egyptian dialect, or by someone who only knows the Saudi dialect. No, Arabic is really.
It's not. I will tell you, there are variations. So, for example, when it comes to the standard language, so there are things that we share together, common things. For example, let's say the root of a word. But sometimes when it comes to dialects, as Maghrebin, not only Tunisians, like Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco, we understand each other. But when it comes to our dialect, to the Egyptians, to Syrian people, sometimes they have challenges. But we do understand their dialects, because in Tunisia, for example, we've watched a lot of Egyptian movies and we've watched a lot of their soap operas. So sometimes when I speak Egyptian to my Egyptian friends, they say me, "Oh, well, that's amazing. You got a nice accent and you know it. How to say words in Egyptian," because that was part of my kind of upbringing. Yeah. And when it comes to the standard Arabic, it's a little bit difficult, just like the Mandarin, so there are certain languages that are complicated a little bit to learn when it comes to syntax, when it comes to, but the basics are there. And, but sometimes unconsciously, the dialect is there. Okay. But practice makes perfect, I guess. Yeah.
Boil it down. There it is. Practice makes perfect.
Yeah, sure. And thanks, Jose. I hope I did not really extend the conversation so much. It was a blast.
It was fun.
For me talking to
you. It was
you.
very fun. It was really fun. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks, and thank you very much. And I hope seriously that I can be part of one of your classes, one of your webinars.
Well, we're going to stay in touch, and I'm already ready to send you a website where I keep all of my resources. There's a link to the playlist of videos, and the paper that I wrote on verbal classrooms. All of it's there. That's where I keep everything.
I will include this as a link hyperlink to the podcast, not only to me, but whoever is interested to know more about your teaching style, to know more about you. And would you like to add anything to?
In there too, you will find in many places my email address. Please feel free, whoever you are, Yousra, yourself, any of your friends, if you're intrigued or if you see anything about verbal classrooms that you want to contact me about, please contact me at Jose at goldfish365 goldfish365.com. That email address.
Last question. Why goldfish?
Yes.
I've seen this.
It's a bit of a long story. To cut it down short, when I was making that website, I was making it with my friend, and the whole website is about using extemporaneous conversation to teach with authentic materials. And we thought, well, what will the conversations mostly be about? And we thought, well, mostly about our life in Japan. Okay, if it's going to be mostly about our life in Japan, what is something that encapsulates life in Japan for somebody from, we are both from Canada. And we said, well, it's kind of like being in a fishbowl, because for him, because he's a tall white man, he's kind of sticks out. Not so much me, but I thought, actually, that might be interesting. The goldfish bowl. Originally, was going to call it the goldfish bowl, but then that's goldfish bowl. And I thought that was a little bit long. Yeah. So I just went with goldfish 365. Yeah.
It's catchy and it's amazing. And it's
easy to remember.
Yeah, it is, and it's indicative of the culture as well. So, but I was just curious, is it like a personal anecdote, something related to goldfish?
A little bit, yeah. So that was the personal anecdote.
I have an anecdote as well linked to that. Yeah, I have an anecdote when I was in Thailand, and I still remember that place because I was lost there. And whenever like there's kind of like we call it la Madeleine de Proust in French. It's like the point when I forgot the word in English. When you mention something, it triggers, that is it. It triggers the whole story. If someone says the goldfish for me, it triggers for me the whole story when I was lost in Thailand, taking photos next to the goldfish kind of river and whatever. And my group were just looking for me, and I was just kind of having fun taking photos next to the goldfish. So everyone has
goldfish. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You know, they get really big, right?
Not so much big. I have a video. I'll share it with you on Facebook. I still kept the photo because even though like I was lost, I took my time to take decent photos, you know, and a video of the place itself. So
we should talk about that sometime. Traveling.
Sure. Yeah, traveling might be my next topic for another season for a new podcast.
Great. That'd be a good thing. Yeah. Thank you for having me on, though. At least for this episode, I really had a good time.
Thank you very much. And to whoever is listening to us, thank you very much for tuning in. And if interested to get any information about Jose, I will include this in the description box. And talk to you soon, and take good care of yourself. And bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.